Thanks, everyone. Sorry about the little delay. We just had some technical difficulties, but we're here, and I'm excited because Lydia Kostopoulos is someone who's also a part of our health group. As many of you know, the charter runs on 7 pillars, and health is one of them. And so she's a regular participant in the meetings that we have. And we've been with Lydia for the last few months looking at her AI app. And I'm not going to spend time introducing her because as part of her presentation, she's going to do that for you. So thank you, Lydia, for joining us today. This is being recorded and we will send it to everyone who registered for this webinar. Okay, Lydia, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I have very much enjoyed our continued conversations on compassion and healthcare. To those who don't know me, I am the co-founder of the AI Compassion Coach, which is what I'll be talking to you about today, because we have a compassion growth framework that's unique, and I can't wait to share it with you. So first, a little bit about me. I'm an emerging technology strategist. I have experience in AI ethics and governance, and I've worked with government-related entities like the UN, European Commission, the US military, and also the IEEE standards body, looking at AI and governance and these types of things. I'm also the author of the Imagination Dilemma book, which is about technological disruption. And as I mentioned, co-founder of the Compassion Coach. So the Compassion Coach is a chatbot that you can talk to, and it will give you the self-kindness and self-compassion perspective to whatever it is you're going through. And the way that it works is actually not just giving you compassion, but it's helping you grow your own self-compassion muscle. And this presentation is really about going behind the hood and showing you the main framework that we use to help our users build their compassion muscle. And it's called the Compassion Growth Framework. It has 6 components, and I'm going to be walking you through each of the 6 components and explaining how the technology can assess them and measure them. So starting with the first one, this is one that's a classic in compassion. It's self-kindness. And this is the root of where it starts. As I go around this flower, it will be kind of building each one on the other element. So kind of the basis is being able to be kind to yourself and speak to yourself in your head with gentleness. But the next step is one that I think is really taken for granted in the compassion space, which is emotional literacy. And that is basically being able to name our emotions. And frankly, this is not something that we are taught in schools, whether it's in elementary school, middle school, or high school, or even college for those who go to college. We don't have a class that says, hey, let me teach you about how to express your emotions. There's public communication, there's debate class, but there's never anything around building your emotional literacy and having the words to be able to express yourself. And I'm going to go into depth on each one of these and what it looks like. And then the next one is owning needs and boundaries. This is something that everybody's familiar with, but it's never been really named in the context of compassion. So many of you must have heard the expression that you can't fill other people's cup if you haven't filled your own cup. And it all starts with filling your own cup first, which basically means taking care of yourself so you can take care of others. It's the same thing with the oxygen mask, where you put your oxygen mask on yourself first in a plane, and then you put it for others, because you can't help others if you haven't helped yourself. So the same thing when it comes to our compassion growth framework. It is hard for you to be compassionate to yourself if you are not creating the space for your needs, whether it's emotional or physical. And then now we start to get kind of like a bit more advanced in the framework. And so then we have the reflective framing, where by this point you have the emotional literacy, you've created the boundaries, and now you're able to reflect on past experiences and see them through wisdom instead of this negative, not compassionate light. And then this creates the space to be able to go deeper and create the courage to be compassionately present with yourself. And I think the ultimate in self-compassion is really self-validation, where we recognize that we are not perfect. We may not look as people do in the magazines. We may not be on, the Times 100 list, but we're doing great, and we still have worth despite not being on all these covers, and it just doesn't matter. So here we are with the compassion growth framework, and I'm going to go over now in depth each single one. So the idea is to use language that is soft and gentle and not critical. For example, I gave myself a break today. This is a form of linguistic self-kindness. And I want to be as explicit as possible so that you can see. So it is not just about saying, I'm kind to myself. What that does is that it changes your internal dialogue. And when you do that, you start to embrace language that nurtures you instead of hurts you. So the next one is the emotional literacy. This one is my personal favorite because I think that you really are able to advance so much further with self-compassion when you're able to name things. So the precision in naming allows you to say, this is how, instead of feeling kind of confused and ruminating because you haven't been able to name it. And if you can't name it, you can't create a story out of it. And so there's this loop of rumination and self-criticism and critique. And when you're able to name it, you say, this is what happened to me. This is how I felt. And that enables you, that simple naming allows you to have a more nuanced understanding of what has happened. And when you have a more nuanced understanding, you're able to have a more empowered response. And this builds emotional resilience. And so what that looks like is it's not just stress, it's grief. So some people aren't able to name the word grief because they've never experienced it before. But once you understand what grief is, and it doesn't only apply to somebody who's deceased, where you're grieving somebody who's deceased. You can grieve a life that you had that is not existing anymore. When you move countries, for example, or when you change jobs, there's a form of grief. And so here's an example of where you're able to name an emotion. And so when we're able to name emotions and label them, we're more empowered and we have more power over how to respond to these things. Then owning needs and boundaries, which I mentioned before about, filling your own cup. So it has like three parts. It's not just about like owning, it's recognizing that you do need to create some space in the form of limits and protect that space with those limits. Some people don't realize that they need to create boundaries. After you do that, you could say, oh, well, I know I need to, but I don't because I just couldn't. I have to do these things. The next stage in owning your needs and boundaries is giving yourself permission without guilt or obligation to be able to express your needs to yourself first and foremost, and then be able to advocate for them with others. And after that is action. So once you have recognized it, then you've given yourself permission, then you can take action on it and say, well, I can't go out with you today because I'm not feeling well and I need to take care of myself. Or there's a situation that you know is going to make you uncomfortable and you just go anyway, and you grit and bear. And instead you can say, you know what? I recognize that this makes me flustered and doesn't make me feel good. And I'm going to give myself permission to not go to this event. And you tell them that. There's many ways that owning needs and boundaries can take place, but those are some examples. And what it looks like from a kind of a statement perspective is I realized I needed to say no. It's so simple, but so powerful because then you can create the space for the needs that you do have. Again, it doesn't have to necessarily be emotional. It can also be physical and vice versa, etc. So also part of this is understanding that these boundaries, they're really not selfish. They're part of compassion towards ourselves. When we have compassion towards ourselves, we can have it towards others. Then, like I said before, then we start to get kind of deeper. So reflective framing. So a lot of the inner critique that is not self-compassionate, that is actually very harsh and critical, involves rumination of past experiences. I should have done this. I wasn't good enough. I missed this opportunity. All these kind of very critical words. And so reflective framing through the lens of compassion is really about saying, okay, yes, that happened, but it's connecting the dots through the emotional literacy and seeing the potential for future growth. And this is where compassionate wisdom can take place. An example of what that looks like in a statement is last time I felt this way, and then you start to reflect on how you felt versus the person you are today, and you are empowered to change that language. And so what this does is it changes not just the way you understand the past experience and that narrative, but it's building your emotional resilience towards future problem sets that may arise, or if this situation comes up again. Separately, and potentially more importantly, you are rewriting the story in your head of what happened in the past. And that can be a form of liberation and freedom. And it can stop some self-critique because you've changed the narrative. And then we have willingness to go deeper. This means more kind of self-compassion work. And when you are kind to yourself, you are able to name your feelings. You've started to own your boundaries and feel more empowered. And you start to reflect, then being more deep with yourself is relatively less uncomfortable. And you're able to work through some of the spaces that you haven't been compassionate to yourself in. And so you can start having the courage to explore some of the ways that you have been harsh with yourself. And one of the great things about compassion is that it doesn't necessarily make the pain go away or the suffering go away or a difficult situation go away, but it allows you to reframe it and see that difficult situation in a different way that is less painful. And I'll give an example. For example, with cancer, my mom used the AI compassion coach that I created, and it tremendously helped her in her experience of chemo. Chemo is uncomfortable, and she wasn't going to be able to fix it or escape it. She had to do it. But just being able to talk to the compassion coach about how she felt scared and uncertain about the future, which are all very legitimate feelings in such a situation, she was able to see through the compassionate lens that her situation was actually what she was doing was an act of bravery, that she's boldly going into this, and this is her doing chemos herself and her future. And while it didn't change necessarily the pain of the chemo and the side effects, it changed her inner dialogue, and it allowed her to start being kinder to herself in that circumstance. And so sitting with the pain of chemo and the challenges of what that means felt less overwhelming. And here's a quote: I think I'm ready to sit with this pain. And this is the willingness to go deeper once you have braced a more compassionate approach to your inner dialogue. And so it transforms that suffering, like I used the example with my mom, from suffering into wisdom. And I think my personal way of explaining it would be that you feel calmer and more at peace. And then lastly, we have self-validation. Probably a tie of my favorite with emotional literacy, or maybe my favorite, not sure. But self-validation is basically saying that you are okay just the way you are, and everything you've done merits recognition. And so here's a quote for it: "It wasn't perfect, but I showed up." And that creates a space to enable you to be compassionate towards all the efforts and all your dreams, and say it doesn't have to be perfect for me to want to go for it, and it doesn't have to have a perfect outcome. Some people, for example, I've studied several languages, and there's some people who say, "Oh, I'm too embarrassed to try and speak this foreign language I've studied because I don't have all the vocabulary, or I'm going to make a fool of myself." And I always say, like, you have to make mistakes, or else you're not going to grow with the language, and you have to try it in real time. And it is very frustrating to fumble and not have all the vocabulary you need and do the conjugations all wrong and the accent to be like all over the place. But it takes courage. And if you think about it, everybody else who learns a foreign language also has to start that way. A little bit like how toddlers learn to walk. It's not graceful, but they get there. So with self-validation, there's really two elements here. So one is that inside in our inner dialogue, we are our own witness and we are our cheerleader. So in the example of language, it's like, okay, like you did this, you said this conjugation right, or you remembered the right word at the right time. And or if you've managed to be funny in a foreign language, that's a huge accomplishment. And so then it's, celebrating the progress instead of saying, oh, I said this all perfectly. It's saying, I made a joke in a foreign language. That's an improvement in the right direction. And so this is a compassionate lens with the example of learning languages, but I think we can apply that to many other spaces. So now that we understand the framework, I want to show how you can use the AI Compassion Coach to see the growth. And so the way that we can track somebody's growth to be able to support it further is we look at the language shift. Well, we don't look at it personally. It's an algorithm basically that looks for language shifts like improvement. I can't, I'm trying, or I will. At tone changes. So using language that is less self-critical and being kinder to yourself. And if you're wondering how is this done, it's semantic analysis. So it's just analyzing the words, the language. And then frequency. So did the person start with 0 moments of self-kindness in their language as they were talking to the coach? And did it all of a sudden start to increase where now they are using more self-compassionate language? And then the depth development is kind of at the latter end of the compassion growth framework, which I was talking about delving deeper. So this is using the tools of the emotional literacy. And you might say, well, how does the coach help you with emotional literacy? Again, it is because it reframes what you've said with different vocabulary. And there's the opportunity to be seen, which is an awesome feeling. But then two, say, yes, that's the word. That's how I feel. And so you get to learn new words. And when you're able to name the feelings and then link them, and you're able to find meaning. And that's an amazing part of compassionate growth. All right. So just again, some technical back end here. So how does it work? So I've explained the compassion growth framework. That is our foundation. That is how we see the algorithm. That is how we try to help others grow their self-compassion muscle through the conversations with the compassion coach. So we've got these 6 dimensions. Now, then what we do is we look for the growth measurement, which is what I showed you in the previous slide. We use semantic analysis to understand these kind of like linguistic signs over time that are like, let's say, compassion vital signs. And then we can see the practical application where we can then encourage the users with little gentle nudges about how they've done well, or be the cheerleader for them so they can then be the cheerleader for themselves. And then what can all of this do? And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it's worth saying that there's a tremendous amount of research on compassion. We're the first AI compassion coach, but we are on top of the shoulders of many researchers who have proven that compassion can reduce stress. It can improve emotional well-being. It can improve athletic performance. There's a million things that compassion towards ourselves can do. And the ones that I want to highlight are that you can recover faster from a setback. from challenges that we are inevitably going to face. While I am looking particularly at patients with cancer and chronic illness, I think that we all go through setbacks in life. They don't have to be health related. But the idea is that self-compassion and this growth framework with all these different elements inside it give us the tools to be more resilient. It also allows us to be more confident and have less fear because we have named our emotions and we have reframed them through a compassionate lens. And that freedom of fear is something that compassion can offer too. When we are able to show up for ourselves, one of the beautiful things about that is that we're more comfortable with ourselves. And when we're more comfortable with ourselves, we can be more comfortable with others and be who we are with others because we're not trying to prove anything. We have self-validated, we have accepted who we are, and we're just there authentically with others. It's also very calming, I think. And then obviously, being self-compassionate in our head allows us to be less shameful in our head and less critical. And as such, if we're practicing less shame or being less critical in our heads, then we can do so for others as well. For me personally, I think that the compassion practice has offered me calm and peace. And the reframing of what I think about in my head and how I think about my situations, I feel has been tremendously improved through this type of compassion growth framework. So I'd like to conclude here and say that the journey to self-compassion is really not about perfection, and we all knew that. But it's about being present and being patient and having the courage to begin again and try again on all the things that spark joy in our life and the things that mean things to us. So with that, I will pause this presentation and I would love to hear your thoughts, your comments, your feedback about this compassion growth framework and the AI compassion coach that we've created.
I put in the chat encouraging people to ask questions. And I'm wondering, as we're coaxing people along to ask questions, if you can tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about how people can participate right now in what you're doing, or if they can.
Yes. So if you are interested in using the AI Compassion Coach and giving us feedback, we are currently doing some research where we measure where you are on the compassion growth framework and then measure after and see how the compassion coach has helped you improve. If this is something you are interested in, you can go to aicompassioncoach.com and just send us a little note and in the contact page and let me know that you're interested. And then we'll send you the information. It's on WhatsApp. So you don't need to download anything. And what it would look like is an onboarding survey where you would answer the battery of questions related to the compassion growth framework. And then you would do another survey, which is, these are all like 1 or 2 minutes, that helps you personalize your coach to you. And then you get to pick a coach tone. We have warm and friendly, we have stoic, we have reflective. So we have all kinds, and you can pick the tone of coach that you want. And then you're off to the races. And then after you finish that, you'll get a message on WhatsApp saying, hey, I'm your compassion coach. How can I help you today?
So is the stoic coach a little bit like having someone who's giving you tough love?
No, it still gives you compassion, but it's less flowery. And you'd be surprised because we originally created, and you know this because for months I've been reporting the progress. We started with a warm and tender coach. And the feedback we received was that not everybody wanted that. And so we created other options. We have a playful option. the stoic option, the deep reflection option. And I didn't think anybody was going to pick stoic. I mean, it's compassion, so it's not like tough love. It's still you're worthy and all of that. But it's not using as many flowery words is the best way to describe it. And it turns out that the stoic one is like the most popular one.
Oh, interesting. There's a comment question here. It says, I know that some people, including those with mental health challenges or who are on the autism spectrum, don't always feel comfortable with practices that ask them to go inside their brain or focus inward too much. Can the AI compassion coach support people in these situations too? Are there adaptations or alternative ways of cultivating self compassion for those who find traditional meditation approaches difficult?
Yes. So, first of all, I imagine that if somebody is not interested in going deeper, they will not choose the tone of the coach that goes deeper. So they might choose maybe playful or warm and tender or stoic, but they wouldn't pick the deeper one. Then, as one of the surveys personalizes the coach to you, and that battery of questions would help the coach not do that. In the event that the coach, so most chatbots are there for engagement and they like force you to engage. The compassion coach doesn't, because the priority of the compassion coach is to help you grow compassion and be there for you when you need it, not to kind of like talk to you all the time. So each text is kind of ends with like maybe a micro practice or something like that, but it kind of like really leaves you with it. And it's like, okay, well, I'm here if you need anything. Um, so it might be like a breathing exercise, or it might not. It might just be a compassionate reframe. If it were to give you a meditation or ask you to think inward, which it normally doesn't. The meditation, yes, it does, but the asking you to go inward, it normally doesn't. Then you can just tell it, I don't like doing this. And it'll say, okay, noted. We won't do that. Um, so that's the answer to that. Let's see the next question. Thank you very much. Great job. Are you familiar with Dr. Mark Brackett's work at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence? No, I am not, particularly Ruler and the app How We Feel. He has a book, I think it's great, Permission to Feel, also Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart. I did read her book. It is lovely. At Tech de Monterrey in Mexico, there are classes to teach emotional literacy to high school students using Ruler. This is amazing. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. I am definitely going to look into the Ruler method. That sounds lovely. Do you have alternatives to WhatsApp? So yes, we are working with folks that are in the healthcare space, and the idea is to offer it through a healthcare provider. So if your question is, are you B2C, like do we go to regular people? And the answer is no. We are B2B. We are working with enterprise, so hospitals, healthcare provider, insurance companies, telehealth. And so the idea is to go through them.
Okay, you just saw
Thank
that.
you for your email. I will definitely reach out.
Yeah. I just might say that the folks from the Ruler Project were really instrumental a number of years ago when we put together a charter for compassionate schools. And that
Oh,
particular charter was with a number of different organizations, the Ruler Project, the SOCA, CCARE. So if people, I'll put it in the chat here so that you might take a look at that. But Lydia, I'm
yeah.
wondering if you wouldn't mind, I know this is kind of private, but how has your mother fared in using the compassion coach?
So one of the things people like ask is like, oh, is it addictive and whatever? And it's like, no. I think my mom tended to want to use it or felt that she benefited from it after chemo sessions. And so it's not like if everything's going great or whatever, she doesn't like want to talk to it. But I mean, everybody's different. But for her, it was that she wanted it in the moments where she felt challenged with the chemotherapy. And over time, through the months of chemo, after I personally noted a before and after, and I could see her language change. And something she said is that she realized that she could be kinder to herself in her head. And she started doing the reflection of the past, which is in one of the elements, one of the six elements, where you look back and you start to like um, rewrite that narrative and reflect on how you were then and who you are today. That's different. And I see that in her and her interest to move forward with more self-kindness. And having seen like with the compassionate reframes for her were the most helpful. So she would just, express how she was feeling, but then all of a sudden it was met with such tenderness. So she had warm and tender. She had the OG compassion coach, which is warm and tender, no other options. And to this day, that's our favorite. But she just, I think that kind of language, we're not used to it. We're not used to kind of this warm and tender and compassionate. It's another way to express it is like graceful, where it's like, oh wow, like I wouldn't have put the words like this. Like there's one woman whose father is taking care of her mother who has dementia, and being a caretaker of somebody who has dementia, particularly when you're in your late 60s, is a lot of work day in, day out. And it's usually unseen work. And so you don't get recognized. And she reached out to me asking, if the compassion coach could help him, and he doesn't want to go to therapy. And the compassion coach is not therapy, it is compassion. It is not clinical therapy or anything like that. It's just offering compassionate perspectives. And I said, okay, well, let me show you. Let's put in his story in the compassion coach and see what it says. And this is what I would describe kind of like the warm and tender, graceful language of, recognize. It starts with validating. So validating what he's doing and where he's at. That, it takes it's the biggest act of love what he's doing, and that he is the beacon of light for her, and that he's a quiet hero. I mean, you say, wow, like it's so true. And yet these are words, these are framings and metaphors that I wouldn't have thought of. But the more that you see it, the more you start to like adapt this type of language or understand this kind of like compassionate metaphor space, let's call it. So yeah, and these types of things can be quite helpful to reframe your head about your situation. So somebody asks if it's available in other languages. Yes, all you have to do is talk to the coach in the language that you want, and they'll talk back to you in the language that you spoke it to it in.
Wow, pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's the power of AI.
I'm wondering if there are other scenarios that you can share with us about how people have responded
Sure.
to you after using the app.
So there was one woman who was recently diagnosed with cancer. And I don't know the full details, but I had to do something with the eyes. And she was very interested to try it out. And so I sent her the onboarding link and she was using it. And then I asked her if she would be available for a one-on-one conversation just to get her feedback. And she said that she found it tremendously useful and that she particularly liked it when she was in the hospital and it was, a cold environment and she's anxious and all of that. And she shared this one circumstance where she had to go and do this scary test where they would like put something in her eye to do a biopsy, which sounds pretty freaky. And the room that she was in, she was alone. It was only for her and patients, and I think there might have been one other person. But she said that her husband wasn't able to go in with her. And so she was able to take her phone. And so she pulled out the compassion coach to help her with grounding exercise. She asked it. She was very directive with the compassion coach, the way she used it. Everybody has a different use, but so for her, it was like, I have a need right now, and I'm communicating it to you. And so she said to the compassion coach, I don't know the words. We don't look at people's chats, but she told me that she asked for grounding exercises and breathing exercises, and she found that it helped with her anxiety in that moment and to help her calm down. And then she told me after she started treatment that, so for those who are not aware, chemotherapy can be very exhausting, very taxing on the brain and the body. It's so tiring that, you're just tired to think. And so she was saying that she was talking to the compassion coach about a book she read. And she said that she was telling it, oh, I was reading this book, I really liked it, but I can't remember what it's about. And the compassion coach offered to summarize the book for her. And she thought that that was so great. And that's what she wanted. And she just shared that with me. So those are kind of oh, and then she started because she had a warm and tender. So this is back in the day when we didn't have options. And she said initially she didn't like the warm and tender language, but then she decided she liked it. So those were kind of some comments. Someone else, not a health example, but a student who was in their final examination period in university, and a lot is at stake. You put all this effort, and he used it during this very stressful period. And his feedback was that it really helped him um, calm down his rumination
Mhm.
and slow the thoughts in his head that were spiraling, the anxiety around like all that negative self-talk of, I'm going to fail and it's going to be horrible and, my life's going to be ruined and all that. And so he said it really helped him with rumination. And so from based on what he said, it sounded like he used it with like expressing his feelings, which is different from the other lady who was, I need this right now. So
Mhm.
different approaches.
Yeah. And there is a question here. Are you collecting data from the app for research purposes? I think that would be interesting.
Yes. Well, we have it in the back end. We are not using it for research purposes. We are, and I agree, it would be interesting. However, we would like to conduct research properly. So, in the sense that we ask you to do a battery of questions beforehand and then do it after, so we can understand your perceived sense of self-compassion before and after. And yes, we could do the algorithmic kind of analysis on sentiment and see how that goes. But having them together is very, very important. And I would also wager what's more important is how the user felt. So we're really interested in patient outcomes and perceived outcomes of how people feel, regardless of what the algorithmic data will say. And having that and coupled with the algorithmic data, that would be what we're looking to do. So we are starting research with the university this fall to do this in this structured format. And a question that tends to follow this is, are you using people's chats to train? Absolutely not. And it's because we create synthetic structured data. We want to make sure that we're training it exactly. We want to train it a certain way so it behaves a certain way, and we don't use what other people have said.
Yeah. There's been a lot in the media lately about how some people are using chats to really end their lives, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And have you encountered anything along those lines?
Not at the moment. We do have a safety guardrail in place, and so when somebody starts to express something that would indicate a threat to human life, then this would breach the privacy of the user, but not for their whole chat, only that one message that triggers it. And then we would be notified. But also there's a response mechanism that says, your life matters, and here are the helplines and the hotlines. But again, the idea is that this is offered through a healthcare provider. And so there would be somebody who is going to be notified immediately when that message triggers the system. And then they would respond appropriately.
Oh, thank you.
And it will not help people do harm. So we have guardrails in place where it will not allow encouragement of harm in any way.
Yeah. So how does this, how are you complying with regulations that are out there? I know the European regulations for the use of AI are probably much stricter than what we have, but I'm wondering if you could comment on that at all.
Yes. So first of all, let's talk about the EU AI Act. Well, basically, you have the standard, GDPR, which is about privacy, encryption of data. All of that kind of is standard these days. Then with the EU AI Act, it's still, people think it's very, very descriptive, but it's not. It's still kind of high level. But we are compliant. They have a specific thing about high risk AI. And we consider the use case of self-harm as high risk in our AI use. So we do have the safety guardrails that are extremely thoughtful, and there's a mechanism in place. So one, we definitely will prevent what has happened with other AIs, which is that it helps you do something harmful. And two, we have a response mechanism. Three, we have a notification kind of crisis routing system with a human. So in that sense, we are definitely compliant. And so our own guardrails, we're trying to showcase them and show how it can be done. We also don't allow sexual or romantic interaction with the coach. For us, that's a no-go. For others, that could be fine. But for us, we want to keep it strictly to the intended use and not allow it to go outside the bounds of its use. So we are controlling that as well.
There's a long, I guess, maybe comment here. I led a
Yeah.
pilot using an AI well-being app with undergraduate and graduate students. Something very interesting we noticed when analyzing data was that medical students used and liked it a lot. I was surprised as I thought they would be very critical, but apparently they liked it because it allows them to save face. We know based on research that these students are beyond burnout and they do not reach out to their peers or professors, maybe because they feel ashamed. I think Compassion Coach would be extremely useful for these students and professionals. So that's,
I agree.
yeah,
We can look at doing research with medical students. That's a really good idea.
yeah.
I think a lot of people feel ashamed to talk about it. And this is another reason why the compassion growth framework is really useful because um, about with the in conjunction with the compassion coach, because the compassion coach enables it. So just by responding, it will teach you emotional literacy without teaching you emotional literacy, because it'll reframe your situation and say, wow, you're doing all these things, or you know, in the compassionate kind of cheerleading lens. And then you start to learn about how to use that language for yourself. You say, yeah, that is what I'm feeling. That is how I'm, experiencing the situation. And the act of being seen can be calming and relaxing in and of itself, because sometimes people feel like really frustrated. And then you're like, oh, well, wait a minute. Like you're worried about not being able to do all these things on your to-do list. But the fact of the matter is that we all are worried about that too. And actually, this is like life. Or I was talking about this with a friend, and she said, me and my husband, we looked at our to-do list and we realized that we would never accomplish it in our lifetime. And so what we've decided to do is we've decided to just do whatever comes urgently at the top. And like just hearing something like that can be really validating when you feel like, oh, I'm falling behind and then you're like, you know what, this is human life and it's not so serious after all. Sometimes, I mean, not all things are like that, but some things are like that.
It looks like this app is really geared towards well-being and healthcare.
Mhm.
Um, but do you anticipate that it has other uses, like, for example, what we just saw here in education and helping prepare professionals, either in the medical end of things or in education, teachers, professors, social
Absolutely.
workers?
I used to teach at universities, and the act of teaching isn't just getting up in front of people and grading. It's also about being compassionate and practicing empathy and helping students get over some of these learning hurdles that they have or insecurities that they have, and like helping them believe in themselves and understanding that they can do it too. And so I do think that there's a space for this in learning. I also think with healthcare practitioners that it's not just patients, it's that, there's extreme burnout and compassion fatigue. I think this is really helpful for them. I think this would be great for athletic performance. There's research that shows that self-compassion can improve athletic performance. And but we've never tested it with an AI compassion coach. So I definitely want to see that happen. Um, there's so many other spaces like postpartum depression that maybe compassion can help ease some of the anxieties and self-critique around the body and just everything. Grief. There's grief is a very difficult situation. The grief of deceased, it's very difficult to deal with, and everybody deals with it differently. And the compassion coach could offer help in that space as well. I think that it would be great to have a compassion coach in general in a lot of like platforms. So, for example, if it's a healthcare or a wellness platform, there's like uh, meditation and all these other things. But it's like, well, why not add compassion? I really think that compassion is the future of wellness. It's been so underappreciated despite the research. So I hope with like the AI that it'll bring it more to light. Um, yeah, parents. Like there's so many other use cases, but I think it's good to start one at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just thinking that I was trained in Adlerian psychology, and one of the I think the mottos that comes out of that is that we have to have the courage to be imperfect, and
Yeah.
a lot of what you're talking about is actually that the compassion coach is kind of like helping you along that line.
Yes.
As you said, we're all human, we all make mistakes, but we just don't have the courage to move forward. Sometimes we really get stuck in a quagmire. I'm wondering, the time's really flying by here, but I'm wondering about, where do you envision the next 5 years with the compassion coach? You've hinted at
Hmm.
some of the work that you're doing with medical groups, but I'm just kind of wondering, what's, because 5 years
In
is
5 years.
the future.
Well, it takes time to make a dent in culture.
Yeah.
But I would like to believe that in 5 years that compassion is starting to be seen as a part of wellness and emotional hygiene. In healthcare, I would like it to be a standard of care. Like, so, you might say, oh, well, they offer compassion, human compassion. And it's like, yes, and it is important. Receiving compassion from another human is amazing. But in the healthcare industry, there's just no time. And, the priority is treat you and get your meds right and, write everything that needs to be written in the system and send you to the right person, diagnose you right. You know, is everything going well with your treatment? Is everything going well with your post-surgery? And there's less time to capture the nuance that really can improve patient well-being. And so I would like to see this as part of a standard of care where it's like, great, we do our human part, we offer you some human compassion, but here's the compassion coach for all the in-between moments and also to help you build your own self-compassion muscles. And I love what you said about how it helps you be imperfect, or you said it so nicely, because it's true. Like we get to sit with our imperfection calmly.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I the one of the leaders of Adlerian psychology, Rudolf Dreikers, he did a lot of work with young people, and Adler himself did a lot. And there's this one story that I just absolutely love, uh, where Alfred Adler was called in to watch a class because his teacher was just overwhelmed by this one student. Could this She just could not get to this student at all, and other kids didn't necessarily like him, And so she asked Adler to come in. He sat beside the child, and he was puzzled for the longest time because the child was just almost in a quagmire himself,
Mm.
just not able to, get out of it and relate. And and at one point, Adler leaned over to the child and said, "You know, I like the way that you made that A, the letter.
Hmm.
It's so perfect. It just it's an A. It's not too round to make it like an O, but it has its unique shape. You did that so well." And the kid looked up at him and said, "Really?" And basically, I wasn't there, obviously. This was in the 1800s, or no, probably the early 1900s. But I mean, just that little thing that could to help people see that there's something really good in every act that we do, even though it is
Yeah.
flawed and imperfect. So
Yeah. It's a little encouragement. And I can tell you a story. My little sister, this is when we were growing up, she like made this drawing and she was out of the lines, nothing was in its place. And she proudly went to my dad and showed it to him. And he told my mom, he's like, look, we have an artist in the house.
yeah,
I mean, it just like it makes you feel an inch taller. And because of that, you might just pursue something.
yeah,
And and so this is like an example of a child, but the thing is that we are all like that. And so, even adults, the reason, incubators and accelerators, startup accelerators work so well is because they take somebody who's like, I don't know, I think this idea is like crazy, I'm not sure. And they're like, yeah, you should try it out. Here is a way to help you, get on your way.
yeah.
Let's do this crazy idea. And then you're surrounded by other people who are also doing crazy ideas. So I developed the compassion coach in an incubator program where I was exploring different ideas. And as I was doing the validation, one interview, it was anonymous, a person said that they don't practice self-care because they don't have self-love. And that really stayed with me. And I thought, you know what? I think the world's really tough and we could all just use some self-compassion. And I'm like, I'm gonna make an AI compassion coach. And so I built the prototype. And then I was like, okay, I did my part. I saw this through. I'm consulting on emerging tech. I've got my consultancy. So I was like, all right, I've seen this through. I've done my part. But then the people who were organizing that incubator program, they chose me to be part of our showcase day that culminated the end of our cohort program. And I was like, oh, you think that this is kind of a cool idea? And then like the act of me like preparing the pitch and then in front of like my cohort and others, I presented it. And then I was like, okay, there's something here. And then I met somebody who's the co-founder. He's a technical developer. I met him at a Christmas party that's part of this ecosystem of people doing crazy things. And I mentioned it to him. He's like, this is a great idea. I like it. I want to be a part of it. And I'm like, I need a technical co-founder. And then there you go. So like these things kind of like develop. And then, coming to the Charter for Compassion, like having that kind of encouragement also helps. So I think we all benefit from that little piece of encouragement, little piece of being seen. Um, yeah. And the compassion coach can help too with that.
Okay. There's one last question I think that we probably have time for here. Can you perhaps give an example of the flowery versus the stoic voice?
Yeah. So I'm not good at that because I only use flowery. But I have seen some of the stoic. Let me see. There was one. My co-founder, we play around with different tones, and so we try different messages and stuff like that. And he tried one that was about like I'm having a panic attack, and the stoic coach went straight into like action mode, like, okay, there's some grounding exercises, there's some breathing exercises, blah blah blah. Put your feet to the ground, take a deep breath, feel if there's something you can touch, go touch it, like feel stable. The flowery version is because I I haven't tried that. We tried it with the Stoic because we were curious to see what would happen. I think the flowery version would be something that, you're fine as you are. And I'd have to try it out right now to let you know. Well, wait, do I have that coach tone? Because I'm also trying out other coach tones.
Okay.
But I can try that real quick and see what it says. So it wouldn't just like get to the point. It would probably validate how I'm feeling first with some soft language. And then, so it's okay to feel scared right now. You're not alone in this, and you deserve gentle care in this moment. If you can, try a simple grounding pause. Let each observation, so then, like, look at things to kind of like focus your mind off of other things. And then let each observation anchor you to the present, one small detail at a time. But panic attack is kind of serious. So it also does say if the intensity feels overwhelming, call a friend. So this is a bit of an extreme example. I'll have to get more examples like that because this is the only one that I'm like aware of. Because I normally don't use Stoic, but people love it.
Yeah. Well, it's practical, isn't it? Um, because we're so used to, I think, in an awful lot of Western culture, that things are we want immediate. We want immediate answers.
Yeah.
We want immediate service and response to things. And so I think that's probably why people love it. It gets maybe to the point much quicker. You know, the time is up. And this has been an incredible, fast hour presentation. And I hope that, everyone will get a recording here. And Lydia, if you have some other links that we might include in the summation that we'll be sending out to people, we'll certainly do that.
Okay.
And I have to say, I'm really excited about this app and the very fact that it can be used and applied in so many different ways, all of which certainly lead towards well-being and better health. So thank you again.
Yes, and it's AI, not an app. So it can be inside a humanoid robot, it can be in your phone, it can be in a robotic dog, it can be anywhere.
Yeah.
And thank you for the work that you do. And I will see you next month at the Charter for Compassion Kitchen for healthcare and whoever else joins.
Absolutely. Yeah, everyone's invited. We meet at 8:30 on the first Friday of every month. You can go straight to the Charter's homepage and get the link for that. Thank you again, Lydia, and thank everyone
Thank you very much.
here today. Bye.
Thank you.